Calvin Preacher Broussard had only stopped mopping once in his entire life. Today was the second time. 11 years at Angola. You stop reacting to things here. You stop feeling things here. That's how you survive. But something made him look up, and when he did, he didn't look away. Years later, Preacher would never be able to explain what that something was. He just knew it was the most important thing he'd ever listened to. Building C Corridor, Angola, Louisiana, February 7th, 1967. 6:14 a.m. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, concrete walls, cold sweat, disinfectant. 20 feet of empty space between two men. One of them was Dale Thibodaux, 6'3", 247 pounds. 17 years working Angola's most violent yard. Louisiana State Boxing Champion, 1952. The kind of man Angola was built around. He never slouched, not in the yard, not in the warden's office, not once in 17 years. Men who didn't know him noticed that first. Men who did knew what it meant. The other man was small, gray work shirt, no badge, no escort, standing completely still, not afraid, not pretended to be unafraid. Actually, not afraid. Preacher had seen brave men in Angola. He'd seen men who thought they were brave. He knew the difference. This was something else entirely. One detail everyone missed that morning. Nobody knew who this man was. Not Dale, not the guards at intake, not even Warden James Pickett, 60 feet away and walking closer. The truth was stranger than anything Angola had seen in its entire history. What Dale didn't know, the man across from him had spent 15 years studying exactly where bodies break. What nobody in that corridor understood, this man had walked into Angola deliberately. What Dale was about to learn, a boxing champion's greatest weapon means nothing when the other man isn't where your fist lands. Dale's boots hit the concrete. One step, two. The man in gray watched him come, didn't shift his weight, didn't raise his hands, didn't speak, just watched. Preacher gripped his mop handle, held his breath. 11 years at Angola. He'd never done that either. This is what happened in the next 47 seconds. February 7th, 1967, 5:52 a.m. 22 minutes before any of this. Dr. Harold Voss had been awake since 4. He was a thin man, nervous energy. Wire-rimmed glasses he kept adjusting. He'd spent 3 years convincing Warden Pickett that Angola needed something different. Not more discipline. Different discipline. The kind that comes from inside a man. The kind Bruce Lee had been teaching. The arrangement was simple. Bruce would spend the morning in Building C, a demonstration, a conversation, something for the inmates to think about. Warden Pickett had agreed, quietly, skeptically, the way practical men agree to things they don't fully believe in. Just keep it clean, Harold! That was all he'd said. What Pickett didn't say, he'd had doubts about this visit from the beginning. Something about it had felt unfinished. He couldn't name it then. He would be able to name it later. The problem started at 5:58 a.m. Block D medical emergency. Intake officer Raymond Guidry, 31 years old, 6 months on the job, got the radio call mid-process. Bruce Lee stood at his window. Visitor log, visitor badge, standard procedure. Guidry looked at the radio, looked at Bruce. "1 second," he said. He never came back. What nobody knew at the time, Guidry had been distracted by something else entirely. Not the medical emergency. Something on the radio. A detail that wouldn't surface until 3 weeks later. Bruce waited 4 minutes, then followed the directions Dr. Voss had written on a note card. Building C, second left, corridor 7. He walked in alone. No badge, no escort, no paperwork. The corridor smelled of concrete and bleach and something older underneath. Fluorescent lights ran the length of the ceiling. One of them flickered near the far end. Preacher was already there, working his way toward the middle. He didn't look up when Bruce entered. Not yet. Then Dale Thibodaux turned the corner. But who was Dale Thibodaux? To most people at Angola, he was simply the officer. The one you didn't test. The one the warden called first. He was 41 years old, 6'3", 247 pounds of structured discipline. His posture was the first thing everyone noticed. Perfectly straight, always. Not rigid, straight. The way a man stands when standing correctly has become unconscious. When Dale walked into a room, conversation shifted, not because he was loud, because he was certain. That certainty had been building for a long time. The question nobody asked: what happens to a man built entirely on certainty when certainty runs out? That answer was still 17 years away. Dale Thibodaux grew up in Baton Rouge, seventh of 8 children. His father worked the docks. His mother worked a laundry on Plank Road. The house was small and loud and always on the edge of something breaking. Dale learned early that the world respects one language: strength, not cruelty, not size alone. The kind of strength that says, I have considered the situation, and I am not afraid of it. He started boxing at 14, a gym on Government Street run by a man named Elroy Marsh. Elroy didn't teach boys to fight. He taught them to think inside a fight. Your hands are tools, Elroy used to say. A fool swings, a boxer places. Dale listened. For 8 years, he placed. At 20, he was the best amateur boxer in East Baton Rouge. At 22, he was fighting statewide. At 24, he won the Louisiana State Amateur Championship. The headline in the Advocate read, "Thibodaux wins by precision. Not by power, by precision." He kept that clipping in his wallet for 17 years. It was still there the morning of February 7th, 1967. He would not check for it that evening. Some things you stop carrying without deciding to, but boxing didn't feed 8 children, and Dale's father had gotten sick. Angola was hiring. The pay was steady. The work was hard. The environment was something Dale had to learn to carry differently than he expected. He started as a line officer. By year 3, he was running Building C's morning shift. By year 7, he was the officer other officers came to when something felt wrong in the yard. He'd seen men try to break Angola. He'd seen Angola break them first. In 1958, 9 years before this morning, a prisoner named Clifford Hayes walked off a work detail while Dale was on post. Dale was 23 feet away. He turned to answer a question from a younger officer. 11 seconds. That was all. Hayes made it to the perimeter road before they caught him, but in the chase, Officer Tommy Bro fell. Twisted knee, torn ligament. He walked with a limp after that. Tommy never blamed Dale. Dale never stopped. That guilt had become something else over 9 years. It had become precision. Every morning, Dale walked Building C's corridor the same way Elroy Marsh had taught him to approach a fight. Assess, control, maintain. He believed. Fully, completely, without question. That order was the only thing standing between Angola and something much worse. Order wasn't just procedure. Order was mercy. One moment of inattention, he told younger officers, and somebody gets hurt. Could be them. Could be you. Could be a man who had nothing to do with anything. He'd lived that lesson. He didn't need to repeat it. That was the man who turned the corner into Building C corridor at 6:14 a.m. on February 7th, 1967, and saw a small man in a gray work shirt, no badge, standing in the middle of his corridor, completely still. Something in Dale's chest tightened. His hand moved to his radio, then stopped. Something wasn't right. Escaped inmates ran. They hid. They did not stand in the center of corridors under fluorescent lights, watching you approach with calm, dark eyes. But the badge wasn't there. The escort wasn't there. And protocol was protocol. Protocol had kept Tommy Bro's limp from becoming something worse. Dale walked forward. Preacher heard the boots first. He knew that sound. Thibodaux. He kept mopping. Eyes down. That was the rule at Angola. Eyes down, hands busy, mind somewhere else. But something made him slow. Something in the air of that corridor had changed. It wasn't noise. It was the absence of it, like the moment before weather. He looked up. Dale was 20 feet from the man in gray and closing. "Hey!" Dale's voice was low, controlled. "Where's your badge?" The man in gray looked at him without hurrying. "I'm a visitor," he said. "Dr. Voss arranged—" Visitors wear badges. "The intake officer was called away. There was a medical situation on Block D." Dale stopped 8 feet away. He was looking at this man the way Elroy Marsh had taught him to look at opponents. Not at the eyes, at the center, at the weight distribution, at what a body was prepared to do. This man's weight was perfectly balanced. Perfectly. Not braced for impact, not coiled to run. Just present, settled. Like he was standing on ground he'd chosen. That detail everyone missed. A man with nothing to hide doesn't stand like that. A man with everything to hide doesn't stand like that either. Only one kind of man stands like that. And Dale didn't have a category for it yet. This would bother him more than the 47 seconds ever did. "I need you to come with me," Dale said. "Of course," the man said. He took one step forward. Dale's hand went up. Slowly. "I understand." 60 feet away, Warden James Pickett had paused his walkthrough. He could see them, but not hear them. Something about the scene was wrong, and he couldn't place it yet. He started walking faster. At the far end of the building, a door banged open. Dr. Harold Voss, breathing hard, glasses fogged from running. "Dale, wait!" But 40 feet of corridor is a long distance when things are already moving. Dale looked at the man in gray, at the no badge, at the uncategorizable stillness. 9 years of protocol made the decision before his mind finished the thought. His right hand shot forward. A grab, not a strike. Collar, control, standard restraint. The man in gray rotated, not backward, sideways. The rotation was so small, 4 inches, maybe 5, that it almost didn't look like movement. But Dale's grip closed on empty air. His hand had been exactly where the collar was. Then it wasn't. Dale blinked. He'd boxed for 10 years. He'd grabbed men for 17. That had never happened. He adjusted. His left hand this time. Lower. Lapel grip. The man moved again. Same principle. Different direction. Smaller than before. 1 inch, maybe 2. Dale's left hand found nothing. Preacher had completely stopped mopping. He was watching the way you watch something that doesn't make sense yet. This detail would matter later. Preacher had seen 100 fights in Angola. He'd never seen a man simply not be where hands went. Dale stepped back, reset. His boxing instincts took over. Jab, fast, measured, exactly the kind of punch Elroy Marsh had called the question. A testing strike, not to hurt, to find. The man slipped inside it, not away from it, inside it. His shoulder dipped 2 inches. His body turned, and suddenly Dale's extended arm was past him, and the man was in the space the arm had just left. A sound like air displacement. Nothing landing. Dale threw a right cross. This one connected, glancing off the shoulder. The sound was flat, hand on meat, not the clean crack of a solid hit. The man took it, moved with it, like he'd expected it, like he'd decided where he would be when it arrived. Preacher exhaled. His hands tightened on the mop handle. Dale felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. The first edge of confusion inside a fight. He pushed it down. Size always wins in tight spaces, he thought. He'd believed that completely. He stepped forward and drove. Full weight, full momentum. He got his arms around the man, both arms, and slammed him into the concrete wall. The impact was loud in the corridor. Preacher looked away. Warden Pickett froze. The man in gray was pinned back to the wall. Dale's weight against him. Nowhere to go. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. Dale pressed harder. 5, 6, 7 seconds. The man's eyes never changed. Not panic, not pain. He was looking at Dale the way you look at a math problem you've already solved, waiting for the answer to reveal itself. I've got him, Dale thought. He felt it completely. He was wrong. On the 8th second, the man dropped. Not fell. Dropped. Deliberate. Sudden. Straight down 6 inches. Dale's weight, committed forward, committed hard, had nothing to push against. His own momentum lurched. In the same instant, the man pivoted at the hip. One motion, controlled, like water finding a drain. Dale's mass redirected. He felt it in his feet first. The ground wasn't where his weight expected it. Then a strike, precise, behind the jaw, just below the ear. Not hard, specific. The nerve cluster behind Dale Thibodaux's jaw introduced itself for the first time in 41 years. His body received the message before his brain did. Not pain. Something stranger than pain. Like a switch had been thrown that only his legs knew about. His legs made a decision without consulting him. Down, not crashing, not collapsing, folding. The way a structure comes down when the right support is removed. He was on one knee, then both. The corridor was very quiet. 47 seconds. Fight over. Bruce walked away. Story done. Except Dale was still on both knees, and the man in gray hadn't left. The man in gray took one step back, looked at Dale, waited. Then he extended his hand. Dale stared at it. His jaw was sending signals his brain was still sorting. His posture, the one that had never broken in 17 years, had broken. He was aware of that. He didn't know what to do with it. You are not hurt, the man said quietly. Take a moment. Dale looked at the hand, looked at the man's face. There was nothing in it that resembled victory. Just patience. Just presence. How? Dale said. It wasn't a complete question. The man considered it. You are stronger than me, he said. That is true. You are also larger. That is also true. He paused. But you committed to where you thought I would be, not where I was. Silence. Strength is only one tool. Dale took the hand. It was the first time in 17 years that something in Building C corridor had made him feel like a student. He wasn't sure yet whether that was terrible or necessary. At the far end of the corridor, Dr. Harold Voss had stopped running. He was standing very still, glasses still fogged, hand over his mouth. Warden Pickett had reached a distance of 20 feet. He had stopped too. He would think about what he'd seen for years afterward. Not the fight, the hand, the way it had been extended before Dale had even decided to take it. Nurse Patricia Elmore arrived 4 minutes later. Station medic, 12 years at Angola. She'd assessed men after riots, after fights, after things she didn't write in her reports. She looked at Dale, checked his jaw, checked his eyes. You are fine, she said quietly. Dale nodded. She looked at Bruce once, said nothing. But on her way out of the corridor, she paused at the door, looked back. She would tell a colleague that evening, I've seen men get knocked down 100 times in this place. I never saw one get up differently before. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Preacher set his mop against the wall very carefully. He didn't pick it up again that morning. Years later, those closest to him would say that Preacher described it only once, to a younger inmate who asked him what the most surprising thing he'd ever seen at Angola was. Preacher thought about it for a long time. A small man make a large man understand something, he said, without making the large man feel small. He never described it again after that, what he never told anyone. There was a third thing he saw that morning, something that happened in the 2 seconds before Dale took the hand. He kept that part, locked it somewhere private. It stayed there the rest of his life. Everything you've heard so far? That was the setup. What happened in the next 3 minutes became something Angola carried for decades. This is how it unfolded. Raymond Guidry arrived at 6:21 a.m. visitor badge in hand. 7 minutes too late, he stood in the corridor doorway and looked at Dale on one knee, and the man in gray standing above him with an extended hand, and Dr. Voss with his fogged glasses, and Warden Pickett with his arms crossed. Guidry opened his mouth, closed it. "I'm sorry," he finally said. To the room, to no one specifically, to everyone. Nobody responded. The moment was already past the point where an apology could do much. Dale took the hand. He stood slowly. His jaw had a dull warmth to it that he knew would become something more by evening. He straightened his uniform. His posture came back, automatically, without thought. Some things are too deeply written to break permanently. "I owe you an explanation," Warden Pickett said to Bruce. "You owe me nothing," Bruce said. "Your officer was doing his job." Pickett looked at Dale. Dale said nothing. He was looking at his hands, the hands that had grabbed air. That detail, the hands looking at themselves, was something 3 people in that corridor noticed, and none of them mentioned for years. The demonstration that morning was quiet. 23 inmates in a room too small for the weight of what had already happened in the corridor. Bruce spoke in short sentences. He didn't lecture. He suggested. "The body knows more than the mind thinks it does," he said. "The problem is the mind doesn't trust it." He paused. "Angola teaches you to distrust everything. That makes you hard. Hard things break." An inmate in the 3rd row, young, maybe 20, a scar on his chin from something before Angola, leaned forward. "So what do you do instead?" he asked. Bruce looked at him. "You learn to be water," he said. "Water doesn't fight the river. It is the river." The young inmate leaned back. He turned that over for a long time. Dale was standing at the back of the room. He hadn't been asked to stay. He hadn't been asked to leave. He stayed. He listened. He didn't take notes. He didn't need to. Some things write themselves. 11:23 p.m. Dale Thibodaux sat in his truck in the Angola parking lot. Engine off, hands on the steering wheel. He'd been sitting there for 40 minutes. His jaw had become what he'd expected by evening, a dull, specific ache, not the worst pain he'd felt. The most instructive. He was replaying the 47 seconds, not the end of them, the beginning. The moment his grip had closed on empty air, he'd thrown that grab 10,000 times in 17 years. It had always found something. Until today. He turned his hands over in the dark cab, looked at them the way he hadn't looked at them since he was 14 years old in Elroy Marsh's gym. These hands had built 17 years of certainty. One corridor, 47 seconds. And the certainty wasn't gone. But it had a question inside it now, a specific question, not about the man in gray, about himself. He'd committed to where he thought the man would be, not where the man was. How many times had he done that before? In the corridor? In the yard? With the men he was supposed to be managing? He sat in the dark for another 20 minutes. Then he drove home. He didn't sleep well. He didn't expect to. February 10th, 3 days later. The story had moved through Angola the way stories move through closed systems. Fast, mutating, unstoppable. By the second day, the version circulating among inmates had Bruce Lee thrown Dale through a wall. Through a wall. A concrete wall. Dale had heard this version from Officer Mouton, who had heard it from an inmate in Block A, who had gotten it from someone in Building C who hadn't been within 50 feet of the corridor. Dale said nothing when Mouton told him, just looked at him. Mouton stopped talking. The version the preacher carried was different, quieter. He told it once to a young inmate named Marcus Webb, who was 3 weeks into a 4-year sentence and still raw with it. "What really happened?" Marcus asked. Preacher thought about it. "A man came in here that nobody knew," he said, "and another man tried to put him in a category before he understood him. Marcus waited. Didn't go how the second man expected." Because the first man was Bruce Lee? Because the first man understood something the second man didn't yet. Marcus sat with that. What did he understand? Preacher picked up his mop. "That's the question, isn't it?" He walked away. Marcus Webb thought about that conversation for a long time after. He would carry it further than he knew. Nobody in that building could have predicted what Marcus Webb would do with it. Not Preacher, not Dale, not even Marcus himself. Not yet. 3 weeks later, the radio details surfaced. Guidry hadn't been distracted by the Block D emergency at all. He'd heard Dr. Voss's name on the channel, a miscommunication from admin, someone asking if the visit had been canceled. Guidry assumed it had. He never checked. That was the whole story. A misheard word, a assumption nobody corrected. And Bruce Lee walked into Building C alone. Dale made his decision on the morning of February 10th. He drove to Angola an hour early, sat in Warden Pickett's office and asked for Dr. Voss's contact information. Pickett looked at him for a long moment, handed it over without comment. Dale wrote one letter, 4 sentences. He asked if there were books, writings, anything the man in gray had put down on paper. He mailed it that afternoon. Most versions of this story end here. Challenge, fight, lesson learned. But what happened in the following weeks changed Building C in ways nobody anticipated. And it started with a question Dale asked an inmate he'd never spoken to directly before. March 21st, 6 weeks after the corridor. Dale Thibodaux was doing his morning walkthrough. Building C. Same route, same time, different eyes. He stopped near a cell where an inmate named Gerald Fontenot was sitting on his bunk, staring at nothing. Fontenot had been at Angola for 6 years. Dale had processed him, managed him, corrected him dozens of times. He had never asked him a question that wasn't procedural. Today he stopped. "Fontenot." The inmate looked up, wary, waiting for the thing that was wrong. "What do you do well?" Dale asked. Fontenot stared at him. "What? What do you do well? Before Angola? What were you good at?" Silence. Fontenot had not been asked that question in 6 years, possibly longer. "I used to fix engines," he said slowly. "Small motors, lawn equipment mostly." Dale nodded. "Okay," he said. He walked on. That was the whole conversation. But Officer Raymond Guidry, walking 6 paces behind Dale that morning, heard it. He told Officer Mouton. Mouton told 2 others. By the end of the week, 3 younger officers were quietly asking similar questions. Nothing formal, nothing ordered. Just a shift. The way a current shifts when something changes upstream. Dale had stopped approaching his corridor the way he approached a fight. He'd stopped committing to where he thought people were. He'd started watching where they actually were. The results were slow, incremental, but they were real. By May, Dale had identified 4 inmates with specific skills he'd never known about. He'd reported them to Dr. Voss, who'd incorporated 2 of them into a vocational program he was piloting. Fontenot fixed a generator in Workshop B that had been broken for 8 months. Warden Pickett said nothing about it officially. Unofficially, he told Dale, "Keep doing whatever you're doing." Dale almost said, "I don't fully know what I'm doing yet." He didn't, but he thought it, and he thought it was probably okay to not know yet. He was learning to be in the right place instead of committing to the wrong one. It was slower. It was harder. It was working. Years later, Dale Thibodaux was 53 years old. He was still at Angola, still straight-backed, still certain. But the certainty had different contents now. He was in the break room with 2 younger officers, both of them in their first year, still figuring out the weight of the place. One of them asked him, "How do you not let it get to you? 17, 20 years of this?" Dale thought about it. He set down his coffee cup. "You ever watch water move around a rock?" he said. The younger officer looked uncertain. "Water doesn't fight the rock," Dale said. "Doesn't pretend the rock isn't there. Finds the way around. Gets to where it's going anyway. That's how you think about this place?" "That's how I think about most things," Dale said. "Took me a while to learn it." He paused. "A man came through here once. Didn't stay long. Left something behind anyway." He picked up his coffee. "That's usually how the important lessons work. They don't announce themselves." He walked back to his shift. The 2 younger officers looked at each other. Neither of them asked who the man was. They both felt somehow that the question wasn't the point. Marcus Webb was released from Angola in 1969. 2 years after the corridor, he went back to New Orleans, started working with young men coming out of the parish jail. No program, no funding, just a folding table and whatever time he had. He never called it anything official, but the one thing he always told them: don't commit to where you think things are. Find where they actually are. He never explained where that came from. He didn't think it needed explaining. Preacher Broussard was released from Angola in 1971, 4 years after the corridor. He went back to New Orleans. He never talked about Angola much, but occasionally, at a kitchen table, or on a porch, or in a church basement after a meeting, he would tell the story. Not the fight, not the 47 seconds, just the part at the end. The hand extended before the answer was given. "That's the part I kept," he would say. "Not the winning, the after." "Most people think the hard part is the fight," he'd tell whoever was listening. "The hard part is what you do when it's over and you're still standing." He'd look out the window. That small man understood that before the fight started. He'd never say the name. He didn't think it was necessary. The lesson didn't belong to a name. It belonged to a corridor, a mop handle. A hand extended in the quiet after. 47 seconds. That's how long it lasted. What it left behind outlasted the building. Understanding isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose. After all the noise has stopped, in the silence where the real work begins.